So this is going to be good. And for friends and family or anybody else, we will be posting these in the future. And most of these are already up, and it takes us about maybe a week to get them up. So feel free, if you learned something from this and you want to share it with somebody else, or if you want to take a look at our other ones, feel free to just jump on and take a look at our website. These are all under resources, and on our website, if you go down to the bottom, you can see there's a media section, and there are links to all of these, along with some other things that we've got. So we're going to wait just a little bit longer, and we will get going here in just a minute. Keith, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
I'm so glad to hear it. And Keith, if you could keep an eye on chat and questions, that would be awesome.
Certainly.
And ironically, perhaps, I have a meeting in about an hour and a half with Zoom about how their webinars work. They reached out to me. And one of the things I'm going to talk to them about is better integration with PowerPoint so that whoever's hosting it can actually see the chat and the Q&A, because now all I can see is the presentation. Anyhow, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to reward those who show up on time, so thank you very much. And today we're talking about managing workplace communications. And this is kind of generic, but it's also very much appropriate for neurodivergent folks who may struggle with the norms or anxiety or how much to say and when, et cetera, and so forth. So we'll go through some of this at a high level. So for those of you who don't know us, EvoLibri Consulting, we've been now in business for 18 years here in Silicon Valley. We provide multidisciplinary services and support to neurodivergent teens and adults, their families and their employers throughout their lives. So I started this company mainly because I have a neurodivergent son who's now 32. And although there were some services available for him in school, I could see there was nothing available for high school students, college students, and employees. And yet, funnily enough, people don't stop being neurodivergent at 18. So I got an idea. So I am Johnston-Tyler. I'm the founder and CEO. And Keith, who are you?
That's what people often ask me. My name is Keith Halperin. I'm not quite sure of my title. It varies here, but I've been working here at EvoLibri for a little bit over a year. I work with both people on the autistic spectrum as well as those with ADHD. Prior to working here, I had been a recruiter for over 30 years, often dealing with the technical people. So consequently, I had a fair run-in with a fair number of folks on the spectrum. Beyond that, I have a neurodivergent son who is also coincidentally 32. And though I've never been formally diagnosed myself, I display a number of characteristics of neurodivergency, a lot of autism, and more recently learning about ADHD, some of those as well. So I tell people if I'm not on the spectrum, I'm damn close to it.
Right.
And I'm very glad to be part of this for you. Back to
Absolutely.
you, Jan.
Thank you, Keith. So the topics for today. First off, why communication matters. Communication for some people is super easy, and for other folks, it's difficult, pretty much in all forms. And but it is kind of, some of you may have heard Keith and I talking about a person who really struggles with all forms of communication, and how can we help a person like that be successful in the workplace, right? So it is kind of my take is it is pretty important for people who are in the workaday world. We're also going to talk about meetings and teamwork, how to navigate those, written communication, managing up, which is something that I do a lot of coaching on for neurodivergent clients on how to manage their managers, handling conflict and feedback, which none of us like, and yet most of us will experience it at some point in our work lives. So let's first off go over this, kind of set the stage. How do we communicate? And I was, thinking about this as I was sitting outside in the sun the other day and enjoying my front yard. And, we communicate all the time. We communicate with ourselves. I know for me, I communicate with myself using calendaring, writing notes, writing documents, and to-do lists, right? So those are all forms of communication in some regards to my future self, right? A calendar is notes to my future self about what I'm supposed to do, who I'm supposed to meet with, where I'm supposed to be at a given time. Notes that I write are a way for my future self to remember what I'm working on, what conversations I had, what to do or action items I have. Documents, depending on the type of document, are important because I'm communicating what I'm thinking now, what an assessment might be, what the findings were, what I recommend in terms of accommodations for people. So that's communicating not only to myself in documentation, but communicating to other people in a clear and concise fashion what my expert opinion might be. We also communicate in to-do lists, right? Again, note to future self, holy cow, I got to make all these phone calls. I got to set up a doctor's appointment. I got to take the cat into the vet, whatever it is, right? These are all communication to our future selves. With our managers, what are we communicating? And this is often where we see things break down. So managers need to know, typically, what the status is. Presumably you have things to do, and some of these things might be long-term. So repeatedly communicating what the status is important for your manager to know, so that when your manager's manager asks a question, hey, where are you on that? Your manager doesn't look stupid. This is part of what we would consider managing up, right? Being able to have the information that the manager needs to do his or her their job. We also need to communicate with our managers barriers, right? What's wrong, what's going, who's not responding, et cetera, and so forth. We need to also communicate successes. Hey, I finally figured it out and I got it in early and that project's done. Do you have something else? And then needs, whether it's I really need to be part of the meetings on Thursday because they're discussing things that I should have input in, or whatever else you need to do your job. We also communicate with our coworkers, request, hey, I have to run out today. Can you check this email that's going to come into both of us and get back to them? I'll be back at about 4, right? So a favor or request. Status. Hey, I finished my piece and it's ready to go to the next level. If you want to take a look at it, that'd be great. And problems, right? You're going to communicate with coworkers about problems that you may have, whether you're asking them to sit down with you for 10 minutes to, hey, can you just be a wall I can bounce ideas off of? Or have you ever come across this and do you have any advice, right? That's the kind of communication we like to see with coworkers. All of these, please remember, you need to respond in a timely fashion to these, especially with managers and coworkers. You don't want to sit on them and then bring these up too late in the game because people need lead time to be able to react. So, Keith, do you want to go through this, why communication matters? Can't I just do my job?
Oh, yes, indeed. And something else that we might get into further along discuss in detail, or perhaps our audience might have questions about that, is what is the meaning of timely? What I might think
Good
is
point.
timely may not be what my boss thinks is timely. So we might get into that as time permits. But anyway, what time permits now is why communication matters. Can I just do my job? Not really, unless you are the only person, you're a solopreneur, as they say, and perhaps if you don't have any clients, then you can. Otherwise, it's absolutely vital to be able to do that. Few of us can do exactly what we want, though that might be a preference. You know, what we need to do is that our colleagues and our supervisors will come with some sight into our work. They need to know what's going on in those areas that Jan was talking about previously. Also, uh, people need to know when things are changing or if there are problems. Again, the barriers and the successes. It's vital, and I've learned this throughout my work career, that you need to let everyone that you are touching base with in an important manner, what is going on. Um, Particularly if there are problems, that way we can raise the alarm if something goes wrong, and to, as we said before, let people know what's going right. That will help us, things like that. Again, going back to the fact that, we are not working, we're not hermit workers in a cave. We have interdependencies. Most of what we do, to some degree, and sometimes to a very great degree, is collaborative. We either work with others or our work product is delivered to others who have to deal with it. So we're clearly not working in a vacuum, or as I was saying just a moment ago, working as a hermit in a cave. Jen,
Although
would you
some
like to
of
add
us
any
might
more on that?
like that, as you noted.
Yes, no, many people who would. It's just that's not very possible these years. So
And,
over to
and
you again.
thank you. And to add on to the interdependencies, one thing, and this came up twice with clients in the last couple of weeks, is trying to find out who your stakeholders are. And
Mhm.
that's an important question, particularly in tech, because we typically have, we talk to our team lead, they know what we're doing, and we might talk to our manager and they might know what we're doing. But there may be other people in an organization who also would like to know or benefit from knowing what the status is. And so a question that you can always ask, whether ask of yourself, ask your colleagues, ask your manager, who are the stakeholders and should I be communicating with them, right? No, this is really
Mhm.
good stuff. So communication in the workplace is bi-directional. And I think that's really key to understand. And early career people in particular struggle with this oftentimes. They don't really understand yet the rules of the road. And when you think about it, they've been sitting in college, presumably, if they're working in a salaried position, and they've been told what to do, and they do the work. And the only time that they might communicate with a professor is if they have questions about the assignment. So there's very little back and forth, right? And so we have to train early career people often about how much and how and when to communicate. So the non-negotiables, the first thing that that workers need to do is acknowledgement of understanding. Management needs a confirmation whether or not it's just a quick Slack message or an email or just a nod in a meeting. Managers need confirmation that you have received the assignment, you understand it, and will complete it in a reasonable time, right? So this is just the basics. Each work culture is a little bit different. Some, places of work assume you're going to go into Jira, for example, and just grab things to work on. You don't need to tell anybody. But in most places, especially for longer term assignments or bigger projects, the manager or team lead wants to make sure that you have accepted that assignment and you're going to be working on it. Status updates. Again, depending on the project, you may be asked to check in on a regular basis on how you're doing on a project. Now, again, for example, if you're using Jira, that might simply be documenting in Jira your progress, whether or not there's a blocker, who you're talking to, whether it's completed and ready for submission. So there are systems in some organizations where status updates are kind of incorporated into that system. But in other types of work, and certainly, across the board, typically there's a person you need to be telling in some form or fashion what you're doing, how you're doing, what's happening, where you're at. And notification of barriers. This is absolutely critical. If you hit a wall, and the wall could be anything from, hey, Samantha needed to check this, but she's, off for a month and I don't know who else can work on it. That's a typical issue. Or, hey, I can't get my environment to work. And so when I try to load the software to work on, it's not loading. So if you're hitting a barrier like that, yes, try to figure it out on your own first, but don't spend days and days and days trying to figure it out because you're losing time. So if you don't think you can fix it, or if you have no good ideas, you need to escalate that quickly. So that's a barrier notification. Keith, possible communication challenges.
I don't think there are any of those, so we can skip that one. No, yeah, but seriously, folks, I'll break this down into like various communication challenges that various groups, either autistic folks or ADHD folks, might have. So we'll go through that. One would be social cues. That's often a very big thing in which people on the autistic spectrum have problems. They aren't able to read their own. They aren't able to, or I should say we sometimes aren't able to read the room. There are unspoken hints and gestures that we are just not getting. So we don't know how to deal with that. That can be a problem. Um, Sarcasm or jokes. Sometimes people are being sarcastic or making jokes. I don't know anybody who does that. There's an example in
Talking
case you
about
have
Keith.
problems with that. Yes. Anyway, both ways. Sometimes people on the spectrum don't get sarcasm or don't know that it is a joke. Sometimes neurotypicals don't get that someone's being sarcastic or making a joke. And I wonder if that's ever happened to anyone around here. But anyway, seriously, that can be a problem. Also, the great area of small talk, a great deal of often important communication. It may not be official, but it can be very important. That is handled in small talk, and often people on the spectrum, that is a very difficult thing for us to do. So, what are some ways of doing this, of dealing with these problems? One thing people can do is take a social skills class for adults or get some specialized coaching. You can do that here. Another thing that's in my case was very helpful. Watch other people's reactions. If you don't get it, it's okay to ask in a friendly way. You don't need to be afraid of that. Um, Here's something I may actually have a little disagreement with this particular part of the slide. Definitely okay to talk about special interest. To point, again, read the news to stay up to date on other topics. Unfortunately, it may depend on what your special or what our special interests may be. That, there's some things that are going to be considered, oh, yeah, he likes the Giants and, the Warriors. Oh, that's okay. He likes his work on clocks that have been made between 1825 and 1840. Might not be well received, or might be some. So again, that would be something to find out what may be considered socially acceptable. And even then, the things that are marginally or might be considered a little bit unusual, if you handle them the right way and don't go on and on, that can also be providing interest to people in a pleasant way. So now we go into the other side, people with ADHD. Uh, Sometimes there's a dealing with impulsivity, being able to really jump right in there, which might be too quick. Staying on topic. I wonder I'd heard about people who are different, have a difficulty in staying on topic, but it's not quite real. And I saw it at people doing this at a baseball game, and I really like, the teams that were playing. So you get the idea.
Yes.
I do that. Quite literally, I do that. And sometimes it is just because things are so overwhelming, people with ADHD can zone out, things like that. So, what should folks do regarding these types of things? One, and then I found particularly helpful with my ADHD clients, is take notes and see if you can hold your questions for a minute. Think before you speak. Another thing is, and as you can tell, I need to work on it sometimes. Do your best to stay on topic. You do the offline topics for later in the Q&A session, for example. Uh, and again, as we mentioned just a moment ago, taking notes helps to stay on topic. Also, some other things, sour candy, drinks, caffeine, fidgets can help stabilize one. So there's some things on both sides of the fence, ADHD and autism. Jan, anything you'd like to add for this?
No, I mean, really about, especially for the ADHD, it's about finding out what works for you. Everybody's a little bit different, about what keeps them focused, what keeps them on topic, how long can you veer off topic and in what circumstance. I mean, it's a bit fluid. And I know for myself, who am a little bit ADHD, these things have helped over time and they tend to help for other people. With regards to the social cues and autism, that's a really big topic, obviously. There's no easy fixes. Again, autism varies widely from person to person. And, these are just some hints that might help. But really, for all of these, if you're really struggling with these communication challenges, it really, I believe, is beneficial to work with a coach to help figure out what works specifically for you, because everybody's different, right? But these are some of the top 10, well, top six, if you will. Thank you, Keith.
Very welcome.
Yeah, and meetings in general. So we all go to meetings. Here we are at a meeting, essentially. So, these are sort of the top three that you've got to be able to do, if at all possible. First off, be on time, right? I mean, all of us are going to be a little late sometimes. Sometimes we're going to be really late. Traffic or something pops up, I mean, we've all been there. But if you are, whoops, sorry about that. If you're one of these people who's habitually late, you really got to work on it, because you will ruin your reputation. Nobody
Yes.
wants to be waiting around for you. Nobody wants you blustering into the meeting late. Do your best. And if it means that you have to leave another meeting a little bit early, or if it means that you have to set a reminder on your calendar, make sure you do it so that you can be on time, right? And be prepared to participate. This is a complaint, if you will, I get from a lot of managers about people attending meetings but not participating. Now, I think that the managers and team leads probably could do a better job getting people to participate by inviting their feedback, by not allowing people to talk over each other. There's a lot of ways that managers can make this better, but at the same time, if you've been invited to a meeting, usually it's because most times it's a status or decision-making meeting, right? One would hope. So think about, what is this meeting about? Do you have status to share in relationship to the topic of the meeting? Do you have questions that need to be answered? So before you walk into the meeting, if you can spend some time prepping, I got to ask Jason about that. I want to see if Suresh ever figured out what was going on with that one piece. Whatever it is, write them down, because once you get into the meeting, if you're like me, the meeting starts taking off and you may have a hard time either remembering to ask those questions or finding room to get into it before the meeting's over. Also think about, what other things do you need? Do you need notes from a previous meeting that you want, to see if those action items got completed? Do you need something to write on? Do you need fidgets? Do you have something that, I have a worry stone somewhere here on my messy desk. that I use when I'm in long meetings, and just that helps keep me regulated. Do you need to grab some water? So make sure that you have everything you need so that you're not thinking about what you wish you had before you walked into the room. And take notes. So note taking is a really interesting phenomenon. It's one of the hardest cognitive tasks we'll do as humans, is to listen to words, information coming in, process that information, and to write it down in our own language simultaneously. It is a huge cognitive load, but this act helps us to really, really understand material. It helps us to synthesize the information, and it helps us to remember. So this is an active form of learning whenever we're taking notes. I'm really, really big on note taking, especially for people who have auditory processing disorder or people who tend to space out in meetings, which we all do from time to time. And as a written record of what people said, don't rely on your memory, write it down. All right. Keith.
Last point on the note-taking, Jane. Are there
Oh,
any
yeah.
particular tools that you can recommend that might be able to help people who might otherwise have difficulty in taking notes?
So I personally have used a lot of different types of tools. Right now, I just use paper and pencil in notepads, and not notepads, but in spiral bound small books. That is the best way, and I mark the books for the months that I've used them, and I date everything that I do. But I've also used LiveScribe. I used to love LiveScribe, and then it became a little bit, the product changed, and I'm not quite keen on it. But it's a really good way to audio record meetings. And the LiveScribe that I used before was really cool because it would sync the audio recording with the notes on the special paper I was using. So that was really, really nice. And then I could upload all of that in digital format to my computer, so I had it for safekeeping. It ended up for me to be a bit laborious for my day-to-day work. I still do it with certain types of cases, but it is a great way, especially if you're a student and you have auditory processing, which I have a little bit of. I can't keep up with what I'm hearing, and it's a really good way to capture it all. There's a lot of different. Rocket Journal is another one. There's several products out there. Just even using your cell phone to record meeting minutes sometimes is useful. Do you have any others that you know about or have used?
Not in particular.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, no problem.
Yeah. I'm old school. I got my notebook right here and my
Yep,
pen.
that's what I have defaulted to.
Yes. Excellent. All right. Well, now we'll go on to the next slide. Etiquette in meetings, otherwise known as while you're there. Big topic, to speak or not to speak. That is the question. Um, in smaller groups, realistically, people are expected to participate and to speak up. However, in larger ones, it may not be the same case. Rather, it would be someone giving information to the group, and it would be more like, take notes, listen to what is being said, and maybe there would be Q&A at the end, but it's not really participatory. Um, Sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly what should be done. Is it a big group? Is it a small group? And it may not be all that clear. My particular suggestion is see what other people are doing in that group that are probably at your level. For example, perhaps your manager might be talking a great deal, and you might get the impression, oh, this is something that we're supposed to do. Well, maybe not. They're doing so because they're manager. Meanwhile, most of your colleagues at the same level you are, they aren't saying much. So the key might be, probably don't say too much in that case. Basically do what others appear to be doing at the same level, things like that. Yes. Another thing, don't check out. Big complaint about is that folks who are present but not paying attention. get off your phone, don't be reading mail, pay attention to what is being said, um, or at least be able to convince others that you're paying attention while you're thinking about other things, things like
I'm
that.
guilty of this, I have to admit.
Yes.
When I'm super stressed and I got a ton of stuff to do, and I'm in a meeting that I don't really have to participate in, I will sit there and check, get rid of my email, the clutter in my email box. But it always happens, Keith, that somebody says, Jan, what do you think? And I'm like, oh, crap. It's really embarrassing, and I know better. So, yeah, don't be me.
Do as we say, not as we do. Ah, hey Gary, you're back. Okay. Let's see. Don't rat hole. If something can't be decided quickly in a meeting, has to take it offline. Generally, one of the things that are most frustrating about meetings is where people go on and on about things. It's like, hey, we don't need to talk here and now. Please take about it. Or, um, so if it doesn't seem very relevant, if it doesn't seem that it can be decided fairly quickly, which means in the length of the meeting, without devoting a huge section to it, table it, put it aside, and then bring up afterwards. Um, any additional points you'd like to bring up, Jan?
No, I mean, I think that this is really good, and as it's tough to know. I mean, really, the best thing to do is watch everybody else in a meeting and see how they are handling things.
Mm-hmm.
But, if everybody's checking out in a meeting, don't be that person. You can at least stay focused on it.
Yes.
It adds to your social credibility. Um,
Yeah.
and, if somebody's rat holing and staying on something and you can see that you're not going to get through the meeting, you might want to gently suggest something like, it sounds like maybe this would be better decided outside of this meeting. What do people think? You may
Mm-hmm.
not have the ability to say, dudes, take this offline, but you can maybe suggest to others kindly that this is not the time and place, that this is great. Yeah. And then after the meeting, what needs to happen, right? So, action items. Because you've been doing your due diligence and you've been writing things down, you may have either questions or tasks that need to be followed up with after the meeting. So, for example, somebody may say to you, hey, Jan, can you please check with XYZ, who's not in the meeting, about something? That's an action for me to do. Or Jan, I need you to resend out that set of notes because apparently nobody bothered to read it or whatever. So what I do is when I'm taking notes, I put in bold letters or capital letters on the side, action, and then I box it and then I write down what I'm supposed to do so that at the end of the meeting or at the end of the day, I can go through and say, did I get all my action items done that I was to follow up on? That's a really good way. It works for me to make sure I'm following up on the things that I need to do. Sometimes we either can't ask a question in a meeting or one comes to mind later. Sometimes meetings are just going full board, can't get a word in edgewise, or maybe it's kind of a corner case, and it doesn't really apply to everybody else in the meeting, so you don't want to rat hole, but you may have to follow up with somebody later. Write those down too in your notes, and after the meeting, send an email or a Slack message and say, hey, this is kind of a weird situation. Can you tell me what you'd like me to do in this situation? Follow up. Don't just let it hang for
Mm-hmm.
till the next meeting. And then additional status. So if you learn something in the meeting that has implications for your own work or something that you heard that might impact somebody else that or their work, it's best to talk to your colleagues and your supervisor about that. Make sure you're passing that information so that other people are aware of what's happening. Keith, do you have any input on that?
Basically, the general thing, and just following up on that, in my own case, that if there may be an action item, and I did this sort of as a matter of course, if, I do it with you, is if I'm not completely clear of what it is I'm supposed to do, I say, my understanding is my action items are X, Y, and Z. Is that correct? Yes, it is. No, okay, what is? Things like that. Or if I don't hear anything, but there might be a presumption that there could be, I say, do you have any action items for me? Just to make it clear and to show that I'm being proactive and trying to, get things done. So that would be my recommendation typically.
Perfect. Perfect. Agreed. All righty. Keith, let's talk about the ecosystem of work.
Yeah, like what, first of all, what does that mean? But
Oh, details.
yeah, it's like, well, anyway, ecosystem, in case you aren't familiar, it's been co-opted by business to mean a lot of things that are working in conjunction the way various biological systems work together. So that's my snarky interpretation, which
Very
basically
good.
means, and pardon? So um, going back to what we said at the very beginning, very rarely, if ever, are people going to be working in isolation. That what they're doing, what they're dependent on from other people, and other people are dependent upon them. Specifically, I have an example of this. I had a client a number of months ago who was a manager who was in a situation where his team was very, very dependent upon the work that was given to his team by other teams, and that team was very dependent on the work that they were getting from yet other teams. And so if there was a delay in one section, it cascaded a down thing. And likewise, that particular manager's team would be, holding things up for people that he had to give it to. So again, very much independent, um, as are we. You as we say, this could be the social contract of work. Um, Sharing the load. Quite often, there's going to be times where there's a lot more to do than was planned upon originally. People are going to have to work harder. People are going to have to work um, longer. And at that point, it's very useful, from my experience, to be willing, if possible, to say, hey, I'm able to help out in doing these extra things, or I have a little bit of bandwidth, as they say, to be able to provide work. It both provides good communication to your manager and coworkers, and it also makes you look good in and of itself that you are, as they say, a team player. Um, Finally, strengthening social bonds. Where do we go? Um, One of the things that's important about communication is that it actually helps the team get stronger. It becomes less of isolated individuals, islands as they were in the work ocean, to more of an actual team and a group and collective effort. Uh, Besides actually getting things done usually more quickly and effectively, it also helps people get along better than that. As we say, it makes a happier workplace. Dan, anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I think the social bonds piece, is something that we don't think about. And I think neurodivergent people in particular may struggle with a little bit. Um, it's sort of a parasocial environment, the workplace, but it's true that, while it should never be tit for tat, kind of, well, I did this for you, so you need to do that for me. Being able to pitch in and help others to share the load. Like if you see somebody struggling, let's say a parent is really ill and they just can't keep up with their work and and you've got a little extra time. Anything you can do to kind of help out for the team effort is really important. I mean, I don't recommend, taking over, doing diving catches all the time to save the team. But, in times of extreme duress, I think it does make the team healthier and more whole if people are willing to go a little bit further than their typical job description requires. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So being a good colleague, all of this is communication. All of it is different forms. And if we look at what being a good colleague is, being a good um, person who can be relied on not only to do their work, but is honest, is open, is good with their communication, is responsive. All of that really helps a person develop their own personal brand, is one company I used to work with. I like to call it, that you will earn respect from other folks. So the first to break it down is reciprocity, and it's a little bit of the golden rule, right? If you need help from a colleague at some point, then you should be able to, if you can, be helpful to them in some form or fashion. So for example, let's say you're working with somebody who's much more senior and you're finding yourself, relying upon their expertise a great deal of time, which is not uncommon because you're learning the ropes and they've been there, they know what to do. Well, you may not be able to help them out technically, but if you're going to go grab a cup of coffee from the cafe, you might stop by their cube if you're in office and say, hey, I'm going to go get a latte. Can I get you anything? Right? Just some kind of reciprocity to show I care that you've been helping. And here's a little thing that I can do for you. It's not the same, but it is a sign of reciprocity, right?
Mhm.
And helping, and thanking people. I really appreciate your help, last week. I really was in a bind, couldn't figure it out. You really, really helped me out. And I know that, I don't have the technical expertise you have, but if there's anything I can do in kind, please let me know. Right. And it could be, for example, that, his car's in the shop and he needs to go pick it up and he really doesn't want to take an Uber. Well, maybe after work you could drive him to, drop him off at the car repair so he can pick up his car. It doesn't have to be, the exact same thing, but that kind of reciprocity, you help me, I help you, is really important for really kind of making a good functioning team and to build those social bonds between people. That makes everything work better in a work environment. Responsiveness. So whether it's email, Slack, Teams, doesn't matter how your company or your workplace is used to communicating, but you gotta stay on top of it. You absolutely need to carve out time every single day to get through your email. And, there's a million different ways you can sort email, have it go to different folders, flag them, whatever, so that you can stay on top of the ones that are most important. I know for me, I spend a great deal of my time, it seems, unsubscribing from a bunch of things because I get so much crap. And it's what happens when you have the same email for almost 20 years. But I still I have a goal that by the end of every day, I have no less than 20 emails in my box that are unread. And I've looked at them and I know what they are and I will act on them, but I leave them as unread so I will get to them. But it's really, really critical. Now, of course, there's a flip side to that, and that is don't get so involved in communication that you don't have time to do your work, but try to stay on top of the things that are the most important. Don't make people send you repeated emails or communications begging for an answer. It's a bad look, right? And, while respect is earned, be aware that everyone has different strengths and you do as well, right? So not everybody's going to be as good as you at certain things, and likely you are not as good as others at other things. So it's important to be patient with other people and to be aware that they may struggle with getting, notes right in Jira, back to that, but that they're really good with customers and that is their strength, right? And maybe you're not so good with customers, but your notes are absolutely flawless. So instead
Mhm.
of pinging people or looking down at them for not being good at one thing, make sure that you're looking at who they are across the board and what they bring to the team, because there's likely other value there. And it's really critical not to badmouth people, not to tattle on them, to team leads and managers. That's something that I see happen a lot. I hate political organizations where that happens. If you have an issue with somebody, and if it's big enough to actually warrant a response, you need to talk to that person first and foremost. If there's an ongoing issue with this person, you need to talk to your team leader, your manager in private and explain your case. But tattling on them, talking about them to other coworkers, you will burn your bridges, you will not be respected, and people will start doing the same to you. Do you have any follow-up on that or any ideas, Keith?
No, I think you hit the high points very well.
Awesome. All right. Keith, it's all about written communication now.
Very good. Yes. Here we go into various types of written communication. Should be quite familiar to most people here. So, first of all, we're talking about email. Subject should be descriptive. It should be clear and concise. I know I am guilty of it from time to time, but I also hate where the email goes on and on and on with a lot of things. That's something to be avoided. So, to be effective, be as clear and concise as possible. Sometimes you don't always have time, but it's also very good to spell and grammar check whenever possible, things like that. Instant messaging, probably familiar, what WhatsApp, Messenger, etc. Typically, I guess you could say, and Slack. Typically, these are considered to be sort of less formal, but they're still important. Um, Again, keep the strong emotional rants off here. That isn't appropriate in a business setting at all. Things like that. Um, and when you're using emojis, if you do choose, try and use the appropriate term. If you're dealing probably with someone who's way above you in the hierarchy, you might not use emojis. You're using a colleague or somebody that is close uh, and is familiar with your weird sense of humor. Then it might be more appropriate to use emojis, things like that. But again, sort of gauge your audience and see who might be appropriate for. Documenting. Okay, as again, we're talking about future self. It's good to write down things which you understand to be very important, uh, things that you will need to know if you're a software engineer, code, policy documents, rules, getting in writing so that you'll have easy reference to that is very important and very powerful. Any additional points on those, Jan?
Just to hammer on on documentation. Um, this is something again that I see all the time, particularly with software engineers who are asked to go in and update existing code, and the previous person has not effectively documented it. And so it just looks like spaghetti, and it's really, really difficult. You owe it to the people, yourself, and to people who come after you to spend a little bit of time writing down documentation so that people can figure out why you made certain decisions. It's also key if you're working on a project for a long period of time to document the decisions you've made. Again, it might be a year later when your manager says, okay, you had a fork in the road, you went this way. Tell me why. And it's important to have a record of why you made that decision because, things come up later on. Well, now knowing everything I know, I would have done it this way. But at the time, none of that existed. So we made the best decision we could at the time, right? So all of this, if you can find a place to write it down, to keep a record of decision making, keep a record in written documentation, in existing docs about why things happened the way they did, you will, trust me, benefit from it over time. So, so a few things. Remember, absolutely no flames. Oh my God. When I was managing a big department and I had a lot of different personalities, oh, every now and again, one of my people would go off and I'd have to haul him into my office and I'd have to have a conversation about why you can't do that. This was a long time ago. Now these folks would be fired probably for doing this. I inherited a lot of um, interesting people. Anyway, no flames. Do not call out, do not chastise, denigrate, or in any other way verbally attack or assault somebody in a written record. OMG, I shouldn't have to say that, but people still do it. If you need to have that conversation, if you're really angry, first off, walk away from the computer. Do not press send. Come back and edit what you're asking, what you're saying, but do not make it personal because it will haunt you and it's just not kind, right? Because once you have proven yourself to be an attack dog, a pit bull, other people will treat you in that same fashion. So it's really not a good idea. If there's something really wrong to the point where you've gotten to that point where you feel like you're ready to just strangle somebody, that's when you need to get other people involved. This is when you need to perhaps talk to your team lead, talk to your manager, your supervisor. Look, I can't do this anymore. This is happening time and time again. It's not getting fixed. I'm on the line. Help me figure this out, right? This is where managers need to talk to each other. Stay on top of it. We talked about this earlier, but with communication, it's really important to kind of check in on your email, your text messages, whatever you're using every couple of hours. And, maybe for some people, it's just once a day. That's fine, but make sure you carve out some time just to keep up with it. I'm sure people whose Gmail accounts have over 10,000 emails in it. And sometimes their work email has probably not that many, but a lot. That just is so overwhelming. You can't deal with it. The best is to get through it as you can to the best of your ability. And it's also important not to let communication overwhelm you. It's perfectly okay to put a do not disturb on your Slack channel, to turn mute on, or to turn off notifications. I don't have notifications on anymore. I'm going to get to it. I'll be there. You can wait, right? It's really important. We are all a little bit Pavlovian. We hear a chime and we get distracted. Oh my God, somebody, does so-and-so get back to me? If you're trying to work, it takes 23 minutes to really engage with your work after you've been distracted. And if you're really trying to, whether it's writing or coding or anything that takes that level of focus, you don't want to continually be pulled off it. So if you can set out some time each and every day for your deep work and not be interrupted, then that's usually good enough. You can even tell your colleagues and your manager, hey, I'm going to put D&D on for a few hours here because I got to finish this up. You can text me if it's urgent, right? So do that for yourself. Stay in touch, but don't be glued to every social comms channel. Keith, any input on that?
Not at this point. What a brief logistical method. I know we seem to be running a little bit long, and I wanted your thoughts about how we should probably proceed.
Well, let's see how much longer. So let's talk real quickly. I'll just run through this if that's okay. Biggest complaints about managing up. Why didn't you tell me? Withholding information is never a good idea. If you can, please, please, please talk to your manager about what's going on. If you have a big problem, always, if you have some ideas of how to fix it before you walk in the door to talk to them, that's best. Why are you telling me? Sort of the flip side of this is every detail you're inundating the manager with. So try to do your best not to handle all the smaller details. Fix things if you can on your own before you escalate, right? And then just let your manager know what happened and how you resolved it. And where's the information? Again, most managers want to have regular status, short, sweet, concise, so that they know where you are on projects. Talk to your manager about how they like to get that information. It could be a one-on-one, it could be a status report at the end of the week, and then provide it. Put it on your calendar, make sure you're doing it. Getting feedback, it should not be personal. It often feels that way. I know you will get better at receiving feedback over time. Be open-minded and in learning mode. Really listen to what the feedback is. Try not to get defensive. Ask for specifics. Often feedback is vague. We don't want to tattle on coworkers. Sometimes managers don't have the full story. So ask for more specifics so that you can actually know what you're supposed to be changing. Otherwise, it's just people say you're not nice. Well, that is so vague. I don't know what to do. I have resting bitch face, or whatever it might be. So you can also ask your manager or supervisor for time to think about it. Can I reflect on this? And then can we follow up in a week before I respond? Perfectly acceptable. And do your best to adapt, right? Being able to think flexibly about what you've learned is really important. If you strongly disagree about what you're hearing, talk to some trusted friends outside of work, not at work, and see what they think. This is what I'm hearing. Be honest with me, guys. Do I come across that way? And if you're hearing, yeah, you do sometimes, we're used to it because we love you, but I could see in work, it may not be so great. Take it to heart. See if you can find a way to sort of change a little bit your behavior or your presentation or how you're doing with things. Conflict in the workplace. I'm sorry to be blowing through this, but Keith is right. We're long. We're too talkative today. Conflict in the workplace, calming things down. Always think first off, what is it the other person wants? Rarely do they want your destruction, right? They have a need that's not being met. You have a need that's not being met. Is there a way that you can find out a way to meet everybody's needs at the same time? A win-win, right? So find out what's hindering them, explain what's hindering you, and see if you can find a good meet in the middle. Cool it down. When things get heated, you're not going to be able to come to any good resolution. Step back, step away, take a break, and then come back together to work collaboratively on a resolution. Again, what do I need? What do you need? Let's see if we can get both. And document the issue, right? After you've gotten particularly some kind of resolution, or if you can't get a resolution, email that person, potentially with your supervisor or manager, and explain the situation. Here's what we agreed on. Here's what we agreed to do, but we're still stuck on this. We can't seem to work it out. We need somebody else to step in and help us with this. Woo, it's a lot of information. So the takeaways, most communication is bidirectional. We get as good as we give. Don't forget that. Working on finding the just right level of communication, which may be different for different people, different organizations, maybe more for team lead, less for manager. That's maybe an ongoing process. And every time you get a new manager, it may change. Be timely, be clear, be concise. If an email is too long, it was meant for a meeting or a phone call. There's too much to cover. Use the right medium for the message. Practice receiving feedback. Practice flexibility. If you need help with any of this, these are good signs that you might need a coach to help you learn these skills. And that's it, everyone. Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry we blew through the last few minutes. We're a few minutes late. Next month, we're going to be talking about professional self-advocacy for neurodivergency. So this is self-advocacy for yourself in the workplace if you're neurodivergent. Keith, do you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, it's just a very large topic, and sometimes it can be, very intimidating. But, as with most things, with practice, you can get better. At least
Excellent.
I have.
That's right. All of us can. So
Yeah.
we have a little bit of time. I can stay on longer. Does anybody have any questions? Anything they'd like to ask us? We do have somebody here, a Q&A. Um, all in, oh, that's awful. So you could not see the slideshow? Oh no. Holy cow. Keith could see it.
Yes.
So I assumed everybody could. I am so sorry about that. That is very, very odd for my attendees here. So what I want you to know is we will save this. It will have darn well better have the slideshow portion of it so that you can see it. And if for some reason it doesn't, I will re-record it and post it. I will take a look at it. I don't know what happened. I went into webinar mode, did share screen, and I have no idea what happened. I am embarrassed and so sorry. Hopefully this was useful. I do really appreciate you coming and joining us. Please have a look at your leisure for this on our website. Again, evolibri.com, go to resources, go down to the bottom, and there's a media section, and that's where it will be. And my apologies for that, but I do thank you for coming today. And we will hopefully see you next month. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you very much for coming.
Bye.